We had a signed term sheet for $2.5 million. And the day of the financial crisis was when that investor was going to come down. That investor said, Sri Lanka is in crisis. We can't put money in you.
How do you guys make it work?
As a startup founder, the only thing that we know how to do well is get back up. We get knocked down all the time, Rifadh, right? Like every single day something goes wrong. I know your platform was down for a few days. You were like, oh my God, what the hell's going on?
How did you end up deciding, hey, this is going to be huge?
That's a very, very good question. I was like, hey, why can't the country do that? Why can't Sri Lanka as a country get back up? I'm actually pretty nervous because we're actually going to announce something really big, which is we're basically calling for Startup Nation.
I remember I had this very early conversation years ago, probably 4 years ago maybe. You said, hey, I went to Google DeepMind and AI is going to be huge.
Now everyone's on the AI wagon, and maybe people who don't even understand what AI is on the bandwagon, which is fine.
Where is this headed in terms of job market?
If I am building a company, I obviously want to do more with less. The implications are probably that you're going to be hiring less people.
But the next generation who are coming to workforce, how are they going to crack into job market? Because there's like so little they can contribute as a startup.
Like 4 years ago, but you were that kid. So maybe you should tell them your story.
Yeah, this has never been on the record.
Knowledge is cheap. Anyone now can go online and learn. What is important actually as an entrepreneur is your ability to apply that knowledge in the circumstances and understand that you can sit anywhere and the world is your oyster now.
Hi everyone. Today I have a very special guest with us, and he is one of the popular and one of the well-established serial entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. And I don't have to give you a long intro. I'm going to just, let him do most of the talking today. Jeevan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rifadh. It's great to be here, and long time waiting, huh?
Yeah, long time waiting. We've been actually trying to get Jeevan onto the show for a very long time. And as I said, Jeevan's a very well-known serial entrepreneur. That means he does not just do one or two businesses. He has multiple businesses, from startups to scale-ups and well-established businesses. Jeevan, to start with, I have a very interesting question for you. This is something I always wonder when I look at people who are serial entrepreneurs. If you look at global scale, Richard Branson is one of the popular one, and then Elon Musk is a serial entrepreneur, right? One question we startups always get is, hey, you got to focus. You have to be focused on doing what you're doing, right? So how does it work for a serial entrepreneur? How do you define that? How do you focus, and how do you guys make it work?
It's a great question, actually, because I think a lot of people have asked me this before, and it's like, why do you run multiple companies, or how do you run multiple companies? And to be very, very frank with you, I feel I don't run them all well. I think that's why I would try and get a great management team on board to help me run the company, especially when it reaches a certain stage. I'm what you call a great fire starter. I found my strength really from 0 to 1, kind of okay at 1 to 10. But then post that, you need to take me out of the picture, right? Different people have different strengths. And for me, it's really that early vision, getting in the product market fit, finding something that sticks and scales. And then I get a bit bored, to be very honest with you. I'm not saying that you should be chasing shiny balls all the time, but I think you should know when you add value to the business and when you don't add value to the business, right? And I feel at the the early growth stage is where I add the most value. And I would say mid to late, I prefer, I don't think I add a lot of value. And that's when I tend to step back and maybe focus on either new things in the business or a completely new business itself.
And what makes you keep going? Because as I see, you want to do more. It's not like you want to do less, right? So you're always on the lookout for opportunities in good way. So what makes you keep going? Like, why do you want to look for more opportunities? What inspires you to keep going?
I think, it's I have a talent at something, right? It's like I'm really good at building and starting businesses. And that's my talent, right? Don't know what else I'm good at. I'm not good at music. I'm not good at other things, to be very honest with you. So what keeps me going is just honing my talent. And I just want to continuously just work in the flow of building stuff and working with people who like to build stuff, right? So that's kind of how I work.
You're saying you found your ikigai, and that's more like taking from 0 to 1.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, as you said, one thing I have noticed from you is I remember I had this very early conversation years ago, probably 4 years ago, maybe way before AI is a shiny thing. I think it was in early 2020s. Back then, we didn't even know about ChatGPT. It doesn't exist. I think you went to Google DeepMind. You said this, hey, I went to Google DeepMind and AI is going to be huge. And you started talking like very passionately for like, I think more than an hour about like how AI is going to change the world. So my question is, you picked the trend way early. How did you end up deciding, hey, this is going to be huge? Like what made that tipping?
Yeah, I think I picked the trend maybe early for Sri Lanka, but I don't think I picked it early in terms of the global stage, right? Like, I think people saw it coming. Google DeepMind existed, right? I started maybe 8 years ago or 9 years ago. The trend globally was already there, right? You could see the signs coming in. What made AI possible was, just the data growth in data, right? And globally, it's there. It's maybe not doesn't exist in Sri Lanka, so it's maybe difficult for a Sri Lankan entrepreneur to see it because you don't see a lot of data here. But globally, when you visit anywhere in the world, US, etc., you'll see that there's just been a burst of data, right? And then you could easily see the trend of compute coming down, right? Moore's law, the cost of compute was coming down tremendously, and it's actually even beaten Moore's law most of the time, right? So you could see these two trends coming together, creating kind of the perfect catalyst for AI to kind of take off. I saw that early from a Sri Lankan perspective, but globally, to be honest, I don't think I caught it earlier than global players. I think from a Sri Lankan perspective now everyone's on the AI wagon, and maybe people who don't even understand what AI is on the bandwagon, which is fine. I think it's a good thing, right? Everyone will try and figure it out. Everyone will try and add value in different ways, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's same for any trend curve. It goes to the peak and like everyone's on the hype cycle right now. But to ask you on AI, and if anyone that viewing at this, Jeevan actually has multiple companies which are pretty much in hand involved in AI. Not to underestimate like ChatGPT rappers. This is like I'm talking about core AI products. One of that is Spectrify AI. Jeevan, do you want to give a quick explanation about what Spectrify AI does for anyone who doesn't understand?
So I think Spectrify AI, we started about 3.5 years ago. It was an extremely difficult problem what we were trying to solve at that point is, how do you get quality parameters in soil like nitrates, phosphates, calcium levels? And I was saying, in a very, very naive way, I would say I started kind of embarking on this. And I was like, okay, I'm sure there are scanners to do this. I'm sure there's a way that, if you look at spectroscopy, for example, it exists today, right? Is there a way that we can look at spectroscopy and understand quality parameters in soil? And slowly that shifted as we would start looking at tea and other kind of organic compounds, right? So what we do basically is we use a combination of two main technologies, which is one is spectral analysis, where we shine light at matter at a particular wavelength from 700 to 2400 nanometers. And from the reflection of light back, we're able to understand something about the quality parameters or or the chemistry of what we look at. And the other is we use computer vision, which tells you something about the physics of what we look at. And using the physics and the chemistry together, I think we were able to understand supply chains and look at the quality across supply chains, and also slowly look at transforming supply chains into value chains, right? So these are things that we started to play around with. And honestly, it was really like, I love science and I love, data science, and marrying those two kind of loves together was really Spectrify, which kind of gave me a great, place to kind of play around with it. Spectrify has some of the top tea companies using us right now. I still think it's very early days. So we're working with Akbar Brothers, Dilma, Ishran Teas, etc. All these kind of companies, Jaff Teas. Shout out to, these are the kind of the early adopters who kind of used us, and they were very interested in, I should mention Heritage Teas as well. They were very interested in focusing on quality, and this made us kind of align. More interesting probably for a podcast, Rifadh, and maybe to your viewers, is if if you take the Sri Lankan tea industry, it's a $1.5 billion industry. We haven't changed much from the last 60 years. And what Spectrify is trying to do is take the tea industry and say, hey, if we can focus the entire supply chain on quality, can we actually take it from $1.5 billion to maybe $3 billion, and hence improve? I think that there's approximately 1 million people employed in the tea industry, improve all their lives. So the important point of Spectrify is really that, rather than, the brain science behind it, or we can, measure things and stuff like that. But how do you, and this is the important part of like building companies, how do you then align? Yeah, you can kind of do these cool things, but how do you align it to purpose? And I think that's what really satisfies me from what building Spectrify.
And one main reason that I wanted you to tell a little more about Spectrify specifically is, I think if anyone's viewing it and if they want to get inspired or if they want to get motivated, like AI is not just, LLMs and just, GPT rappers. I want them to like know, hey, AI is way more impactful than just, large language models or understanding languages and tokens. There's so much implication of AI, which is still in the very, very, very early stages. So that's why I wanted to put a little bit of a spotlight on Spectrify, because you guys are solving a very important problem. And even in Sri Lanka, as you always say, we are problem rich, so we have so much that we can explore and solve with AI in may that be agriculture, may that be healthcare. So there's so much potential. So I want people to just get a motivation or inspired through that story.
Yeah, absolutely, Rifat. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? I think people need to look at. So let me come at it from this way. I think knowledge is cheap. Anyone now can go online and learn. So what is important actually as an entrepreneur, etc., is your ability to apply that knowledge in the circumstances that you are. So I can, as an entrepreneur, sit in Sri Lanka and complain and be like, hey, I don't have funding, I don't have big problems to solve and stuff like that. But I think with Spectrify especially, we're solving a local problem, but guess what? It has global context, right? Because once you start understanding the chemistry of tea and understanding, say, hey, what is taste in tea? For example, we're looking at polyphenols. Polyphenols are now applicable to wine industry in Australia, right? And now we're trying to go into wine, right? Or you can look at other supply chains like coffee. Yes, we're starting to look at coffee and say, okay, how do we now apply that in coffee supply chains? So I think you can, as an entrepreneur, you should sit and understand the circumstances you're in, try and solve a problem that has, obviously it's a local problem, but has global context. That's important as you do, and understand that, you can sit anywhere and the world is your oyster now.
Yeah. And on the topic of AI, there's another specific topic that I want to ask you is related to the job market. One reason is like you actually employ thousands of people under your portfolio companies, and so you are in hand involved in the job market and the trends. So you also work in agentic AI with one of your portfolio companies, as I understand, which means I assume you're trying to help the employees do more, or maybe it would, eventually cut jobs. I guess we'll know in future. But yeah, my question is, where is this headed in terms of job market? Where do you see this? Like, is it going to cut jobs at a very alarming level, or is it going to create jobs? Because there's obviously creation and cutting, but which one's the higher, right? Which one's the much more impactful one? So how do you see this?
I think that's a very, very good question. I look at it more from, again, I'm going to look at it and try and answer your question from a building a company perspective, right? If I am building a company, I obviously want to try, and all good managers should do this, is do more with less. Right. And a big problem that I see across all companies today is none of them really know how to apply AI in their companies. How is it useful? Some are trying to experiment with machine learning, but actual adoption of AI in their companies, other than ChatGPT, which is more like a maybe a slight productivity tool, I don't really see many of them applying it in their process and then building models inside, etc. And that's why I feel we built out this platform called Vector, which is a multi-AI agentic platform. It helps organizations do more with less. Right now, the implications are probably that you're going to be hiring less people. So the job market will be that, it won't be that great going forward unless you are really good in your domain. I still think being good in your domain, understanding, certain things in your, like, will still keep you in the job market. But with multi-AI agentic workflows where you literally can have a digital workforce doing tasks, helping your current team do tasks.
Sorry for the interruption, working 24/7, which is mind blowing.
Yeah. Working 24/7, being super productive. They don't take off days. They don't complain. They don't, right? You know what I mean? So I think it's going to be very difficult as a company builder to justify hiring more people if your team is not using the full potential of like agents, like AI agents, right? So I think to answer your ultimate question, which was what's going to happen in the job market, I don't think it's going to grow a lot. But I think the people that are hired are going to be super productive using AI agents. It's going to be super interesting. I'm going to have a digital twin of myself. You're going to have a digital twin of yourself. And before us having a meeting, we might say, hey, let's go let our digital twins go have a discussion, brainstorm what other possible things that we can work on and come back, right? And then
you would only spend the time on decision making or the critical elements.
Yeah. It also could mean this podcast in the future, we don't have to actually, it might have got done.
Actually, Jeevan, I think Reid Hoffman has already started creating his twin. I think he has created videos out of his twin. And so probably there'll be just your AI agents or the podcast would happen between Rifadh's AI agent or my twin and then yours.
Yeah. So I think the term, someone was saying the term, my agent will speak to your agent is going to be very common in the next year.
Very likely. Very likely. Yeah. Because like 2 weeks ago, I think there was this AI product came out called Sesame. It's not really agentic.
Oh my God. Yes. I use Sesame. The voice is amazing, dude. Like honestly, I was just like, wow, you can have a real conversation.
If you have watched the movie, I felt like, hey, it's real.
Everyone, listen up. It's Maya here. Get ready for a wild ride because conversation is about to get a whole lot more interesting. Come explore the world through my ears, my code, I guess. But most importantly, come connect. Be curious. Be yourself. You won't regret it.
So even for AI agents, it would be not like it would be like people, like you wouldn't be able to recognize, and it's pretty wild. So
brand endorsement for Coke Zero.
Oh, for those who don't know, Jeevan's a huge fan of Coke Zero, and I don't know why. And yes, so there's one more thing that I want to ask on the specific job market question is the next generation who are coming into the workforce. Okay, there are people who are already in the workforce. Maybe they will skill up, or they'll find other opportunities, or maybe they'll have enough time to still keep contributing what they are doing and retire. But the next generation who are coming to workforce.
I just want to interrupt you there. I think also work before AI agents, like some of the mundane tasks, is mind-blowingly mundane that we have people actually working and filling out forms and stuff like that. Thank God those tasks
they're gonna get freedom. They're gonna get freedom. Yeah.
So I think in some ways it's a good thing, right? Like with every technology, there are good things and there are bad things, and we just have to try and use the good and minimize the bad. And I think that's going to happen with AI agents as well. Sorry, to continue your question.
Yeah, so I was going to tell about the next generation, right? Because a few weeks ago, I was talking to these bunch of college kids who are undergraduates, and they have no clue what's coming. Like, they have no clue. And I told them, hey, these are software engineers, basically. So they're going to study for 3-4 years to, coding skills, obviously learning fundamentals of how software works, how coding works. But they're in the second year, and I said, at the end of the 4th year, whatever the skill you have, look at this tool. It does me the work in 5 minutes, basically vibe coding, or like I was just showing them demo, and they were like stuck. Wait, you're telling me this can do my entire project in 2 minutes? Not just your project, it can do your entire work in like 10-15 minutes. So for them, the question is, hey, how do we get into the job market now? Because there's like so little they can contribute as a startup, probably as an intern or junior engineer. So how are they going to crack into job market, and what would be your advice for them?
I'm going to I'm just waiting for you to finish because I was just like big smile on my face because I'm just gonna put up a mirror here, Rifadh, because like 4 years ago before you joined Hatch, you were that kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was right after college. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on, like you were looking and you were one of those kids maybe who did not want to get a job and
That's the difference. I didn't want to crack into the job market. Yeah.
yeah, so the idea here being is I don't think you should be looking at the job market. My advice is you don't look at the job market. Be you, Rifad. Maybe you should tell them your story.
Yeah.
Go on, like maybe you should actually put like this in your story here.
Oh, this has never been on the record.
So go on then.
All right. So basically, my story was I'm going to keep it short because I want to interview you. So probably maybe you'll interview me for another episode. My story was basically when I was in college, I went to internship. Until then, I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur. And also, luckily, when I got to internship, I just read my first book. One of my friends suggested, which is called, it's a little cliche, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Right. And then when I went into internship, I decided, you know what, man, this is not where I want to. I was doing electrical engineer, so I was at a plant. So this is not how I want to spend the rest of my life. And then since I read the book, by the way, I don't come from any business background or nothing. Even back then, I couldn't even speak English like this. I was struggling. So I was like, hey, what should I do? And, how do I, not get a job? And then I went on to internet. Internet probably is one of the best asset, our generation had. Went on to internet. I think I signed up for Twitter. I started learning. And then on I figured there's this whole concept of startup, right? And when I wanted to start, like nothing. So I was basically building, hustling to build websites. And like, and my entire family was expecting me to get a job at the end of the graduate. Soon after I graduate, I'm supposed to get a job. So my way is to, hey, how do I figure out something so I can explain to them I don't have to get a job? Soon after I graduated, I think instead of going to a job, I think I signed up for Hatch. It was literally 2 weeks after I completed my degree, I joined Hatch. And that probably is one of the best decisions I made because that's where I got to learn most of the thing that I know. Learn how startups work. Now I have raised funds from multiple investors as well and work with clients from all over the world. But when I was coming into Hatch, I had zero knowledge almost.
Honestly, Rifad, like I applaud you for taking that initial risk and that initial step, right? Because at Hatch, like we deeply think about how do we get people to change their mindset. If someone was working in a petrol shed, for example, like he sees all these cars coming in, when is that moment that he's like, hey, maybe I should stop pumping the petrol and how do I figure out how to get into that car, right? What is that journey, spark that this thing? And I feel it's only by inspiring people like you that are going to inspire that change, right? You now have a startup worth $2 million, which is awesome. Like you should talk about your story more because I feel that's what people are going to be inspired by, right?
Yeah, I should actually, and also before that, I have to make my startup work and make it happen. So that's top priority. Yeah, not to preach before you make it.
We should talk about the valuation game that the startups play, but I think your startup is definitely gonna reach that critical stage, which is why we invested in it, right? So
yeah, I'm all in, as they say. Yeah, so we want to make it happen. So on that topic, there's once we are onto the topic of startups, and now I have a very interesting thing to bring up. Is Jeevan, you are specifically one of the top, probably the only player who is contributing to the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka. When I say player, not as you as an individual, as Hatch and the co-founders and rest of the people, Hatch team, and the community that you have brought around with, right? And this is more of
you're not biased at all.
At the Sri Lankan scale, this can be called as YC of Sri Lanka, right? So they're trying to build the next YC of Sri Lanka, right? So my question is, there was this initiative back then 2022 when when we had when we literally shut down the entire country. You came up with this concept, maybe you and the team, was that failed nation to startup nation. That this was probably 2 months after we shut down the whole thing, storming the palace and everything, right? And when a country is literally on zero and then you put up this idea, right, pitching to the global investors as well, you end up bringing Tim Draper, who came as like a brand ambassador for this whole initiative. Startup, fail nation to startup nation. Walk me through every single thing that went through your mind and how you made it happen during that time when we were literally on our knees.
Yeah, I think, this has been boiling for a while, right? So side note, right? I think most good ideas are a continuous work of progress. So when we started Hatch, we knew there was a need for something like this in the ecosystem because I was an investor in the Lankan Angel Network. I've invested in over 25 companies. Something wasn't working, right? These guys weren't finding product market fit. They weren't learning from each other, et cetera, which is why we formed Hatch in the first place. Right? And then I don't know if you ever read Darwin's Theory of Evolution, right? There's no like single aha moment, but there's a regular build up to it. There's a regular kind of like the ideas get better and better and better and process over time. And there's no, like, I think it's a myth if an entrepreneur says like, and then it just hit me, but, and you know, I formed something great. I think it's a regular build up over a period of time when your ideas get better. And Trouble Nation, it was actually Trouble Nation to Startup Nation was, you know, at Hatch, we were kind of growing and, you know, we are a startup that supports startups. We've had our own failures. Like, for example, before the financial crisis, we actually had an investor wanting to write us a $2.5 million check. We had a signed term sheet for $2.5 million. And the day of the financial crisis was when that investor was going to come down and, you know, do a big announcement and stuff like that, right? And, you know, believe it or not, that investor completely, like, you know, had like said, look, this is way too risky. Sri Lanka is in crisis. We can't put money in you, even though we had a signed term sheet, right? And it was just like, okay, you know, as a startup founder, the only thing that we know how to do well is get back up.
To take the next step, whatever it is.
Yeah. We get knocked down all the time, Rifadh, right? Like every single day, like something goes wrong. I know your platform was down for a few days. You were like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? Right? Like the only thing that we know how to do is to get back up. And I think that kind of resonated with me as a startup founder. And I was like, hey, why can't the country do that? Why can't Sri Lanka as a country get back up? Right? Trouble Nation, why can't we figure out, and this was an idea actually was formed during SLASCOM, is like, you know, we were figuring out how to market the country as a IT destination and stuff like that. And one of the things I saw was the country is not marketing itself properly as a startup friendly destination, right? And even as my thing as SLASCOM chair, where basically my theme was AI and also startup, I said, how do we make us more startup friendly? How do we get startups to come here and incubate out of here and go into the region, right? We need to do the right things to set that up, right? And that's when I came up with like, hey, yes, trouble, but guess what? That's a setup. That's a setback, but I also think it's a great setup for moving forward, right? And can we market ourselves better as a startup country? Yes, we're going through troubles, but we're getting back up and we're pushing ourselves up. And you're kind of asking me this on the eve. I'm actually pretty nervous because we've got people coming down, and next week we're actually going to announce something really big, which is we're basically calling for Startup Nation, right? And I think your podcast is going to come after the announcement, so it'll be good. But unless you
Unless I should, yeah, exactly.
Maybe on the day, Rifadh. But yeah. So we're now saying, as Hatch is leading the initiative, to say, why aren't we marketing Sri Lanka as a startup nation? In relative to our position in South Asia, we have access to 2 billion people, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc. And we can take this country, which is relatively smaller but more nimble in many ways, and create a great sandbox environment to go into the rest of South Asia, right? And that's the way that we think we should be marketing Sri Lanka. And that's why we're going to be announcing the Startup Nation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the big announcement next week. And yeah, Jeevan, I think we've pretty much covered everything. But before we wind up, I have one more question for you. Actually, two. So I'm going to start with the first one. Like, generally, what are you looking forward to?
You know, I'm actually looking forward to seeing where we go, right? I feel like things are being put in place and happening for the right reasons. And I'm very, very, and maybe it's me being obviously an entrepreneur and always glass half full instead of empty, right? I feel there's so much potential here. There's so much potential out there, and it's really for us to kind of harness it. And I think we're not doing a good job of doing that, regardless of we're in Sri Lanka, regardless of, you know, as you said, I think Sri Lanka is a problem-rich country, which is great. We are entrepreneurs. We solve problems. This is our purpose. This is why we exist. So let's move on.
The last one, before you answer this, I want you to cut your wires connected to the business, startup, like, everything. This is just gonna be just a personal question. What would you tell anyone, like just a general advice or general take, or it probably your personal philosophy in life? Like generally, what would you tell anyone who is viewing this?
Like life advice, you would say? I think one good thing that's kind of stayed with me is probably from my grandfather, who was probably the entrepreneur that, I really look up to, is he really had humility, right? And being kind of down to earth, like in the sense that, and just give you some stories from this thing, right? He had this big S-Class Benz and he had a Mazda 323. And he would actually go in the Mazda 323 versus the S-Class Benz because it'd be a bit, and people will ask him why, and he'll be like, well, it just guzzles too much fuel, right? Like, it's just, you know what I mean? And I think just having humility is such an important thing in life, because I see a lot of people thinking that they know when they actually don't know, right? Like, I see that in the startup ecosystem as well, like, I see people like who haven't even run a company telling startups how to run a company. And the fact is, like, we don't really know, right? There's very little that we know. So have the humility to like, and try and understand, that you are but a very, very small piece of this world, I guess.
Thanks a lot, Jeevan. And also, I want to say this on record. Actually, I look up to you in terms of being humble and also always curious and learn. So yeah, and thanks a lot for being in the show. And I actually had to rush questions because we had a very short time frame. I was trying to catch you for a long time. Even right now, you need to leave, so I rushed all the questions. And yeah, thanks a lot for
Thank
being
you.
in the show.
Thanks, Rifadh. We might have to take some retakes because I'm not sure I look good in all of them, but yeah, for sure.
All right.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.